What?
That's beautiful.
What a critical moment in American history. A question was asked, where do we go from here? And we have landed. You are listening to the Jamal Bryant Podcast, Let's Be Clear. And I am so delighted that we have one of the most brilliant minds of this nation, not the most brilliant black mind, one of the most brilliant minds of this nation. I'm honored. I'm humbled. I'm grateful to be breathing the same oxygen as Dr. Cornel West. Would you please welcome him?
Oh, thank you all so very much.
Come on, make him feel welcome.
Oh, that's so very kind. Oh, how beautiful. How beautiful.
Thank you. Dr. West, I want to jump right in. I am just coming back from sharing at the State of the Union just a few days ago. And I walked out dizzied because I got back to the hotel and the pundit said something I had never heard before. He said, this is the largest number of uncommitted voters in American history right after Super Tuesday. There is a growing groundswell of people who are dissatisfied with both parties and are looking for a viable option. And here you come out of the fog in the mist, out of the dugout. Who knows, but you were born for such a time as this. I am old enough to remember Ross Perot running for president. And at the NAACP convention, he said, "You people." And that was the end of the race.
That's so true.
That was the end of the race. We have always looked symbolically as an independent candidate as just there, but not there. But looking at what just happened in Michigan, why do you think so many Americans are disillusioned with the two-party system?
Well, I want to thank my dear brother for that question, but I want to start by acknowledging that I'm in historic new birth. No, indeed. Now, let's just be honest about this. I'm in historic new birth. And my dear brother, Reverend Dr. Jamal Harrison Bryant, is part of a family of spiritual nobility and theological royalty. And I want the world to know that.
Thank you, sir.
That I do not exist as a Jesus-loving free black man without St. Paul in Cambridge when I was in Harvard College there with Fred Lucas and Floyd Flake and Frank Reed. It goes on and on and on. All of those giants were young in those days. And we were there taking in the bread of life from the one and only Reverend John Bryant. Now, I'm Baptist, and Union Baptist was across the street, but you know how the Holy Ghost works. I headed to Union, and I ended up in St. Paul's every Sunday, and I had to explain to my pastor how the Holy Ghost was leading me toward M-A-A-M-E. But I say that in all seriousness, that my sanity, my dignity, my sense of calling is so deeply tied to the powerful preaching of Reverend John Bryant.
Thank you for that.
And his father is still strong and going. And my dear sister, Reverend Cecilia Bryant, as well. And remember, you were born in 1971. I remember the announcement.
Wow.
What is it, May 21?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Wow.
I remember the announcement, brother. We was praying for you.
Thank you.
And look at him now. Look at him now. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about a great tradition. And one other quick story before I answer this, because this is all about courage and the relation to Christian faith. But I recall when Tavis and I came together and asked for 15 black leaders and 15 black preachers to come together for the Million Man March.
Yes.
And we had 15 on the phone. And that night, all of them said they were going to be there. And in the morning, right in front of the McDonald's shop, Tavis and I, and then here come Reverend Jamal Bryant. He was in his 20s, and it was the three of us who had that meeting. You remember that meeting?
Oh, yeah. They didn't show up.
We would look around for the other brothers and sisters. We said, what happened here?
Yeah.
Good God. And we still love them. They just got cowardly, but we love them. But this brother showed up, and it took a lot of courage for you to show up. And I have never forgotten that. That's 30 years ago.
Wow.
30 years ago.
Wow.
And so it's just a blessing to still be here in our right mind, still tied to our calling. And I want to make it very, very clear. That this campaign ain't nothing but a moment in a movement of a great people who have been dishing out love warriors in the face of hatred and freedom fighters in the face of terror and wounded healers in the face of trauma for 400 years. And so what is happening now is that same tradition is spilling over into electoral politics. And so many of our politicians are wrestling with legalized bribery and normalized corruption. They don't want to tell the truth. They don't have enough backbone. They're too well adjusted to injustice and well adapted to indifference and tied to their success and careers. And we come from a people not just of worldly success. We come from a people of moral and spiritual greatness. Moral and spiritual greatness. And it has everything to do with the blood at the bottom of that cross. And too many of our churches allow that blood to become Kool-Aid.
Wow.
That thin stuff. So you don't get transformed and your world doesn't get turned upside down. So you're in the world but not of it, and you're willing to be nonconformist to the world and transformed by a gift that's been given to you. So when you think about this campaign, don't think of an ordinary political campaign. No. Not at all. I come out of Irene and Clifton West. I come out of Shiloh Baptist Church. I come out of the legacy of Black Panther Party that says, I want to be a free man, and free man is what? A willingness to tell the truth, and condition of truth is to allow suffering to be heard. And so we're living in a moment of such spiritual decay and moral decadence in the country. The wealth inequality is out of control. Organized greed is on steroids. Institutionalized hatred is escalating every day. Fascism is proceeding with the gangster Trump. And I say that out of love. I love everybody, but I know a gangster when I see a gangster. No, and I'm honest about that because I got some gangster in me. Pray for me. I work with it every day. But I also come out of a great truth. I just thought of the picture of your grandfather, Harrison. You know, he's named after Harrison Bryant from the great state of South Carolina. The first day he's at Wilberforce, and he's got so much style. He's got backbone, and he's going to be the father of John and the grandfather of Jamal. That's the greatness of black people at our best. At our best. When we're free enough to say what's on our mind, we got enough love to cut against the grain, and most importantly, we're willing to be humble enough to learn from one another. The history of America, in many ways, is the history of black people at our best, the Black Freedom Movement being the leaven in the American loaf. If black people had created a black version of the Ku Klux Klan, there wouldn't be an America.
Wow.
White brothers and sisters, see black people, you ought to just give us a standing ovation. Because you wouldn't have democracy that's left if it wasn't for black folk choosing truth, justice, and love rather than revenge and hatred. You terrorize us, we terrorize you back. You hate us, we hate you back. No, we came up with something grander. And those of us who've been washed by that blood at the bottom of that cross, it ain't no joke. We are tied to a relationship with a Palestinian Jew named Jesus that tells us that, yes, we can follow Jesus into that temple and run out the money changers, not because we hate the rich. It's because we hate greed and we love people. We love the least of these. We love poor people. We love working people. That's where we come from. And that tradition needs to be heard at this moment because the whole planet has the blues. We're about to lose the whole planet. The American democracy has the blues. We've had the blues for 400 years in America. So you either learn something from a blues people or you lose everything. So I'm just a little small wave in an ocean. That's all I am. So when I speak, I don't want folks to hear just Cornel West. No, I want them to hear Fannie Lou Hamer in me. I want them to hear Martin King in me. I want them to hear John Bryant in me. I want them to hear Reverend C.L. West, my grandfather, in me. I want them to hear some Curtis Mayfield in me. And Aretha Franklin in me. And I'm not saying that just because of our skin pigmentation. Because we got a whole history of black cowards and black gangsters and black thugs. It ain't a question of what color your skin is, the choices that you make. But white supremacy means that the color of your skin means that you're being degraded and demeaned and exploited and talked about and lied on. But it's the choices that we make. And so at this particular moment when it looks as if the American empire is just about to, if not collapse, about to explode. So you got Trump on the one hand leading the country toward Civil War II. And then here comes Biden. You can't say a mumbling word about genocide. Can't say a mumbling word about ethnic cleansing. 14,000 children killed in 3.5 months. Well, I learned in Shiloh Baptist Church and Vacation Bible School, Jesus loves the little children, all the children of the world, red and yellow, black or white. They are precious in his sight. That means a Palestinian baby has exactly the same value as any other baby in the world. That's great. And we'll bear moral and spiritual witness to that. Now, of course, we have our different political and ideological agreements, but those of us who have the audacity to still claim to be followers of a Palestinian Jew named Jesus, we ought to be freed up enough to be able to speak our truths, deal with the consequences, and then connect it to the best of the love that has been poured into us by our parents, our grandparents, our great-great-grandparents who knew levels of barbarity we know not of, even as we deal with our own forms of barbarity. So the answer to your question, my dear brother, the answer to the question is, how does God use each and every one of us at this particular moment in which it looks as if America provides a choice between a neo-fascist Pied Piper and a milquetoast neoliberal Democrat who's leading the war toward World War III. Civil War II, World War III. It reminds me of Henry Highland Garnett when he spoke in the 1840s. And he only had one leg, y'all remember. So he's standing up there with his crutch, probably with a little gangster lean. And he said, black people, let us never, ever confuse the situation of black people with that of the Israelites of the Old Testament. For us, Pharaoh is on both sides of the bloody Red Seas. That's been our situation. And I could hear a courageous black woman in the last seat, the last pew of that church. And she said, could somebody just please sing a song? Because the Spirit will not descend without song and sound. And so our artists and our musicians sing songs of freedom dreams. It could be Swing Low, Sweet Chariot. It could be Zoom by the Commodores. But these are freedom dreams of looking for a way out when there is no way. And we have always been a people who have found a way out when there was no way out, tied to that blood at that crossing part. Yeah. You see? And so right now, the whole country, 75% now almost say they don't want any candidate. Well, who you gonna choose? Well, we'll stay home. Well, that's not gonna help. You still want to participate. Do you think maybe you ought to consider truth, justice, and love? You think that ought to have something to do with the situation? And then here comes the black tradition. And if there was some other folk in the black tradition, that's fine with me. But I decided I'm going to be an extension of that tradition in politics. Because you know I haven't run for any office at all. Right. I used to say you'd see me in the crack house before you see me in the White House. I've said that on many occasions.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Because the crack house, at least the folk are addicted, but they're wrestling with something real. But the White House has been a site of so much corruption, so many lies, so much mendacity, so much white supremacy. And people tell me now, well, when you win, I said, I don't know what the Lord has in store. I'm trying to bear witness and be a witness. I just know I'm not in control of things. I'm here to bear witness and tell truths and pursue justice that focus on poor and working people here and around the world. That's a calling. That's not a career. That's a vocation. That's not a profession. You see? But for all we know, Biden, he tried to be energetic the other day, but he still might run out of gas. Trump may be on the way to jail. They got to move to the B team. No labels now going to run a candidate. We don't know what's happening. We just have to make sure that there is some witness being born that's connected to the plight of poor people and black people here and around the world in the shaping of the dialogue, shaping of the discourse, shaping of the conversation. And there's something immeasurable and spiritual about this, and that is we've got to let our precious young people know that there's some older brothers and sisters who not only believe in them and their possibility, but attempt to exemplify whatever forms of integrity, honesty, decency, generosity at this grim moment. That is not going to be a question simply of having spokespersons who don't want to tell the truth about Gaza. Can you imagine genocide taking place and politicians can't even raise a mumbling word? What is going on? We were just there at the UN together.
Yes, sir.
With the black ministers, led by the black ministers, Brother Stephen Green and the others doing a magnificent job, right?
Yeah.
But how could that be? Fannie Lou Hamer, Stokely Carmichael, Martin King, Malcolm X, they talking about Vietnam in 1965, 6, and 7. Why? Because the Vietnamese baby got the same value as the Palestinian baby, got the same value as the black baby, got the same value as the white baby. Oh, really? If you really believe that, then you're not going to come up with some kind of creation of a port that's going to take 2 months and another 15,000 children are going to be killed because you don't want to put pressure on the Israeli leadership that's still murdering folk every day. He said, oh, Brother West, you sound anti-Semitic. No, not at all. No, not at all. I don't have a hatred of my Jewish brothers and sisters. In fact, I see so many Jewish brothers and sisters saying the same thing I'm saying, and if not now, same thing I'm saying in Jewish Voices for Peace. Don't try to scare me. I'm not an intimidated black man. Not at all. If I love anybody, I love them because God told me to love them. I don't ask for anybody's permission as to who I love. If I love Palestinians, I don't ask for Jewish authorities as to whether I can love them. If I love Jewish brothers and sisters, I don't ask non-Jews if I can love them. I've learned in Shiloh you love everybody and you go down loving and you're faithful unto death. That's one of the great things of our tradition. And we've got to be able to enact that so that our younger generation can see it. So when they hear John Coltrane's Love Supreme, they know it's not just a song. They know it's a way of life. And they hear Stevie Wonder's Love and Need of Love coming out of Whitestone Baptist in Detroit. It ain't just a song he's writing. He learned that from Lula Mae, his mama. He learned that from those folk in that black church. But he got a genius that none of us have for the most part. And though he's seemingly blind, he's seen things and got more profound insight than many of us who have our physical sight. But that's a tradition of the same effort to be love warriors and freedom fighters. And that's the stuff you made of, brother. That's the Bryant family. The West family. Now, we didn't have preachers like your father, you know what I mean? But God gives everybody different gifts.
Yeah.
My grandfather was a great pastor. He wasn't the greatest preacher, but he was a great pastor. But what brought them together? He loved his people. He sacrificed for his people. He served his people. He emptied himself for his people. And that's what we need now more than anything. And that's what's going to shake up America. That's what's going to shake up the world, because this election is not just about the USA. It's about our brothers and sisters in Africa. It's about our brothers and sisters in Asia. It's about our brothers and sisters in the Caribbean. It's about our brothers and sisters in Latin America. There's a global South out there. We got to no longer just be so Amerocentric that we're concerned solely about folk inside of this territory. America has 800 military units around the world, special operations in 130 countries. So what America does affects people in every corner of the globe. That's what it is to be an empire. And so now when they see, let's see what's going on in the presidential campaign. In Chicago and Detroit, yes. ATL, A-Town, yes. But also around the world. Why is that important? Because when black people were fighting against slavery, Ida B. Wells and Frederick Douglass went to other parts of the world. When Ida B. Wells helped break the back of Jim Crow and American terrorism, the whole world took notice, and we know that when Nina Simone sang about Mississippi, damn, I'm going to say that in the church, but y'all know the song I'm talking about. The whole world took notice because they were bearing witness for a truth and a justice and a love. And that's true for Dizzy Gillespie from South Carolina, same South Carolina that Harrison is from. So I know that's a long answer to your question, though, brother. But I appreciate it.
I needed every syllable of it. You would make the fourth significant African American for aspirations to the highest office. I want to extract the center two and trace your genealogy to the first one, Shirley Chisholm.
Yeah.
I want you to see, where do you feel you build on Shirley Chisholm's legacy?
Yeah, you remember one of the mottos of our dear sister out of Brooklyn, our Caribbean sister. Oh, what a brilliant, what a magnificent force for good she was, and her spirit still is. She said, I'm unbossed and I'm unbought. Just let that marinate for a second. How many politicians these days are unbossed and unbought? That meant she was a free black woman. And she wanted to be as free as Sarah Vaughan or Aretha Franklin in politics. To really say what's on her heart and in the dark corners of her own soul. That's the criteria. Shirley met that within the context of the Democratic Party. It's very difficult.
Yes.
Very difficult. She did a magnificent job.
You really became a cornerstone in the community as an asterisk, not as an entertainer or a sports figure, but as a thinker. And what we are seeing is an assault on intellect. With the banning of books, with the marginalization of free thought. And I wanted to know, if you became president, what would you do with the Department of Education?
Oh, yeah. Boy, I tell you. Indeed, indeed. Well, for me, you have to begin with the background conditions. You see that, I have an abolition of poverty policy. So you can't really talk about education unless the children have food in their stomachs. And unless their communities are safe so they can walk the streets without fear. And unless their families and the structures in the community are solid enough so they can pass on the love. What you and I receive with the Bryant family and the West family. We receive so much love, it would take 5 lifetimes for us to think about going to the crack house.
Wow.
Why? Because every time we make a move, we think of grandmama. We make another move, we think of mama. We make another move, we think of dad. And we ain't even got to the cousins yet. You see? But when you grow up and you don't receive enough love and attention and care and focus and being targeted, you are more rootless and deracinated, and you get caught up with the dominant forces of the society, which are market, spectacle, money, status, and violence. America is one of the most violent countries in the history of the modern world. It solves conflict by military means, and our young people pick that up. I was just at Cop City just yesterday, marching with the folk. The militarization at home is tied to the militarization abroad. I was in a high school just the other day. They got more police in the high school than they do counselors or nurses. My God. So when you think about education, we got to think of the background conditions to make sure that they're in place. And then, and here I think it's really much easier than a lot of the folk talk about education. Because you and I have been blessed to go to very elite institutions. He's a Morehouse brother, Duke, and so on, right?
Yes, sir.
What is distinctive about those schools? Well, most of those schools have students who themselves go to schools that are already high quality. You know, when I first got to Harvard, and I'm coming out of the chocolate side of Sacramento public school, and they telling me, well, in my senior classes, we had 13 students, we had 2 teachers, and the teachers told us we were brilliant every day, whether we were or not. Well, if people have that every day and every week, even if you're mediocre, you got to do something brilliant just to justify all of the affirmation. Well, that's what well-to-do kids get. How come you can't do that for precious poor black children? I want small classrooms. Whatever the well-to-do is getting, that's what the hood is going to get, because it's not just going to be a hood. Once again, it's going to be a neighborhood. It's going to be a neighborhood. We're going to have small classes for the precious black folk. When I walked in and saw the beautiful face of this precious black girl, she catapult, summer camp. And it just hit me. I said, oh, New Birth is on it. You got to focus. Love the young folk. That's what happened to us. We were loved. Whether we deserved it or not, I knew I was a gangster when I was 7, but Aunt Dick and Hinton keep loving me anyway. You might have some potential, little Negro. I said, I don't know about that, but I'm inseparable from his love. And his love falls far short of mom and dad. And I'll never be one half the human being they are. No matter how much visibility I get, forget about what the world got to say. I know where the real source comes from.
Yeah.
Reminds me of the Grammys where Sam Cooke and Curtis Mayfield and Sly Stone never won a Grammy, but Milli Vanilli won 2. Don't care about no Grammy. We know what black genius is. We know what black talent is. We know what black music is, black soul is. They don't need no Grammy for us to know that. Now, they can go on and get them if they want to. Give it to Beyonce and Aretha, and so that's fine. But it ain't the Grammy that makes them great. It's the service that makes them great. It's the touching of our souls, the sustain us that makes them great. That's the standard. And once we lose connection with that standard, I call it the landmark. We got to go back to the landmark. But the problem of all landmarks is they become narrow. So you got to bring a question mark to the landmark to keep the bread of life fresh. So without the deep spiritual depths of the landmark, you can't make it.
Wow.
But the landmark got to keep growing in responding to new circumstances and conditions. And that's precisely what the best of a church or a mosque or a synagogue or an educational system and so on. But let us be very clear. All this talk about the banning of books and so forth and so on, we know how barbaric that is, and we got to be against all forms of censorship. But let us never assume that America has ever told the full truth about the black situation in America. They ain't never told the truth. The country's predicated on the efficacy of lies. And anybody who's fundamentally told the truth about America when it comes to suffering of indigenous people and poor people and working people and especially black folk, because we've been the most chronically hated, you see, that you got to be willing to pay a cost and take some hits. That's where the courage comes in. So yes, we got to fight against the book banning and so forth. But let's not think that we could pass all the laws in the world that schools would teach black history and think that somehow you're going to get the full truth about black people in the schools. It's so much better to have that than what we have now. But the only way you really get the truth about black folk is that you keep the tradition strong in the hearts and minds and souls of young black people and seeing it in examples, in exemplars of people they can touch, people they can hug, people they can laugh with. That's the truth.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yes.
And that's why when you ask jazz musicians, well, what do you think about being voted so-and-so a Downbeat magazine? It don't mean that much to me other than getting the job. I want to know what the spirit of Charlie Parker thinks about my playing. I want to think, what does Mahalia think?
Yeah.
What does Coltrane think? It ain't the mainstream of all these different critics trying to keep their careers together. One of the reasons why we have such a vicious attack on intellect, because intellect in America is associated with smartness. And I've never been impressed by smartness. Because my grandmother went to second grade, and she was wise, very wise. I tell my students at Harvard, Yale, Princeton, let the phones be smart. You be wise and courageous and compassionate. Smartness ain't nothing but a form of cleverness that might help you make your move in terms of your brand. And young folk come up to me all the time, Brother West, I'm working on my brand. I see you got your brand. I said, no, my folk came here branded on slave ships. And those bones are still at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. When they were taking to slave auctions and slave plantations with a brand. No, we have a cause, not a brand. Never confuse a market brand with a moral cause. And for those of us who are Christians, the kingdom of God ain't no brand. No, it ain't no brand. The black freedom struggle ain't no brand. Liberation movements around the world is not a brand. You got to use the market now. And I love the work you all are doing. When you told me that historic announcement, maybe I shouldn't go into it, but about that housing, man.
Yes.
Oh, man, we started shouting right there in the room. Oh, do people know about it yet?
Not yet. Hold on. I wanted to ask you.
Oh, Lord, but that's what I mean by serving the people.
Yeah. One of the greatest modern assaults of the advancement of the civil rights movement is the attack on DEI, diversity, yes, equity, and inclusion.
Absolutely.
And I want to really go to the top because we saw a modern lynching at Harvard University with our sister, who was the first black female president, President Gay. And I wanted you to really expound on what you see and feel and sense on this erasure of DEI is as if everything is already equitable.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. One is that, I was never really comfortable with diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's not my language. My language is, I want to know the truth. I want justice. That's why I'm for reparations. I want truth and justice, and I want to keep the love in it. So when they came up with DEI, I knew that these were corporate bureaucracies that wanted to dilute wrestling with the legacy of white supremacy and somehow cast it as just a matter of diversity and having different people with colorful faces around the corporate office and feeling as if they really had truth and justice. And I was there to say, no, that's too deodorized. We're going to keep this funky now. No, and there's always truth in the funk. I mean, Bootsy and George Clinton and James Brown, they constitute very much who we are.
Yes.
You see, and that's not just a song. The funk is always suspicious of deodorized discourses, of sanitized, sterilized discourses. If you're going to keep it funky, you keep it real. And Ashford and Simpson say, ain't nothing like the
real thing.
The real thing. That's why we love the folk like Malcolm and the other. You don't have to be a Muslim to love that brother. He was for real. Even when he was wrong, he said white folk are devils. You know they're not devils. What, they got devilish behavior? You got a point, my brother. He's keeping it real. Absolutely. And so DEI, I thought from the very beginning, was already diluted. So you can't fight for something that's diluted. Pat Boone sings a version of Curtis Mayfield. I'm not going to the club. I want to hear Curtis. He'll make $50 million and Curtis will make $500,000. That's America. Diluting the funk. You see? Well, from the very beginning, DEI was diluted, but we had to support it. It was the best we had. You see? But truth and justice dropped out. Truth and justice dropped out. You see? And then in the case of Harvard, now this is a very fascinating case because you all know I had my troubles with Harvard twice, with Harvard president. And it was intense, and I just had to let them know that I'm a child of Irene and Clifton. So, you know, you come at me, I'm a Christian, but I'm not a pacifist, you know. I got a little Joe Frazier and Muhammad Ali in me. In the name of Jesus, in the name of Jesus. Now, in the name of Jesus. So I had intense fights with both presidents. But the second one had something to do with the Palestinian cause because I was the faculty advisor of Kuumba, which is a great gospel choir at Harvard, but also faculty advisor for the Palestinian students. And it was hard for us even to have various programs on campus, to find a room. To find a room. And so when I did decide to leave and in part get pushed back, my sister Claudine Gay, she was the head of the faculty at that time, you see. And so, you know, I give my sister a call and don't receive anything, another telephone call and don't receive anything. And I say, my sister, I just want to talk to you and see what you think about this issue of truth and justice. And I never did. Well, that's all right because she was scared. I understand that. People get scared. When the same forces came at her and claimed that she was anti-Semitic, I had to tell the truth and say, well, even though she didn't receive my call, I can defend her based on principle because she doesn't have an anti-Semitic bone in her body. So if you're going to make her the poster child of being anti-Semitic, you got the wrong sister. We got some black folk around who are anti-Semitic. I can show you some Negroes now who might qualify. Just like I can show you some Jewish folk who are racist against black people. And I can find you some Jewish folk who wrestle with it. And we got a whole wave of black folk who've been fighting against anti-Semitism for a long, long time. So I defended her. But the sad thing was, it began with an attack of her when she gave that presentation at the committee, and she became the poster child of anti-Semitism in America. And that, to me, is sick. As much as I disagree with my sister, as much as I was upset when she didn't defend me, she is not anti-Semitic. She might be weak. She may at times be cowardly. But she's not anti-Semitic at all. So we defended her, and we lost. We won the first round, didn't we? Then they came back with plagiarism. The plagiarism was nothing but a rationalization for the attack on her as an anti-Semite. You see. And then the plagiarism began to spill over and discover, well, the person who was his name, Brother Ackman, that's his name, the Jewish brother named Ackman, found out his wife plagiarized her dissertation. And you could imagine it just starts flowing all around the town. But it's another example of the level of hypocrisy and double standards when it comes to black people, in high places. Yeah. And so I pray for her family. I was talking to Brother Skip Gates a few weeks ago, who I dearly love. You know, Skip. Yeah. It's not like he got a whole lot of Malcolm X in him. You know what I mean? Yeah. He's a magnificent scholar. I love that brother. I defend that brother. But he's not a Malcolm X kind of brother. No. Not at all. I talked to Skip. He said, Corn, he says, the public lynching, I can't take it. I live right across the street from my dear sister Claudine. They got these big old buses saying, you are a disgrace. You are an anti-Semite in front of her house. I said, brother, we got to go physically move those buses. That's just wrong. You got to have righteous indignation, just like Jesus in the temple. You can't allow something like that to go on. Or what happens? If you don't do it, sooner or later, they'll be at your house.
That's right.
And you'll be looking for supporters. Where is the folk behind me? Where is the folk behind my back? Where were you and somebody else? It's got to be mutual. That's why our meeting at McDonald's meant so much.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? The three of us. Now, the fascinating thing was Brother Johnson, Robert Johnson, changed his mind. You remember that?
Oh, yeah.
As a result of us three and the Lord, Brother Robert Johnson changed his mind and allowed us to go on the show and talk about the Million Man March.
Yeah.
And I give him credit for that. But he doesn't have a lot of Malcolm X in him either.
No.
He's just a good, rich brother who could get scared when things get too intense.
Yeah.
That's all right. That's human. I understand.
In 2016, after Trump was elected, you said in an interview, Trump may be the president America deserves. That they were dealing with the backlash of so many who were upset just on the presence of Obama. Depending on the landscape, the views of where it is that we are for people who are watching from the Congo, from the Sudan, from Haiti, what would you say is the kind of president America deserves now?
Well, yeah, deserves could mean two things. Deserves could mean at the highest level of what ought to be the case, that America produces somebody who the American masses of poor and working people would benefit from. That's one sense of deserve. The other sense of deserve is those who actually vote, and those who vote in such a way that their willful ignorance and blindness and callousness and indifference toward the suffering produce the president who wins. If we live in a sick empire, in a sick country, well, over 80 million people out of 333 million Americans would choose Donald Trump, gangster that he is, felonies, near indictments, xenophobic language. He is the number one choice of the majority of the country. Then a sick country gets a sick president.
Wow.
But that's been the history of black folk for 400 years. Most of the presidents were slaveholders. In the 1850s, when Frederick Douglass had to make a choice between a liberal slaveholder and a conservative slaveholder, he wrote a note to the great Harriet Tubman and said, "What we gonna do, Sister Harriet?" And she said, "Well, Fred, just remember God ain't dead." And she said, "We're going to create a third party, a Liberty Party," which they did. Because we're not going to vote between two slaveholders, one who's liberal and one who's conservative. We're abolitionists. We want to abolish slavery. Well, it doesn't have a chance. That's not the point right now. We're going to bear witness to make sure that sooner or later they break the back of slavery, and we're not going to do it by keep supporting these slaveholder presidents. And that Liberty Party became the Republican Party, as so many of you know. And though Lincoln had white supremacist sensibilities, it was the pressure from Frederick Douglass, the pressure from Harriet Tubman, the pressure from Sojourner Truth, and the pressure from some of our magnificent vanilla abolitionists, many of them Quakers.
Yeah.
I was with a Quaker American Friends Committee just yesterday. And I love my vanilla brothers and sisters who cut against the grain of white supremacy. It makes Thanksgiving very difficult because you got a whole lot of cousins who never got the memo. And a whole lot of members of your family that never got the memo, but you stand on principle, integrity, and honesty. This is the kind of white brother and sister I want to be. God called me to be this kind of force for the kingdom. And the rest of y'all who still supporting white supremacy, I'm going to cut against you. Now pass the turkey, because I'm still loving the family. Well, that's what it is to be a Christian. In the world, but not of it. But if you can't do it with a joy, and it's a joy that the world didn't give you and the world can't take away. If you can't do it with a love that sustains you as flawed and finite that we all are, then you already have a problem. And this is one of the issues now with the country is that, you see, mass incarceration And Biden was the architect of it. He bragged about it for 30 years. He gave the famous speech on the floor of the Senate talking about super predators, throw away the key and so forth. I said, hey, what's wrong with this, brother? He's talking about my kids. He's talking about folk I grew up with. He's talking about folk I play basketball with. And 55% of them in jail for nonviolent offenses, and they get locked up, and you brag about it. That's a key sweat moment. Something just ain't right. Oh, yeah, we got to raise our voices. And part of the problem is you got too many black politicians who just fail to meet the test. I was in South Carolina just yesterday. The United Citizens Party endorsed me. It's an all-black party. But it's the same party that promoted my dear brother Clyburn when he went in as a radical, given the Jim Crow system in South Carolina. And he went in alongside Stokely Carmichael and James Lawson and Diane Nash. These are freedom fighters. And he was a young brother. And I'll never forget that Clyburn. And I still love the brother, but look at him now. He got inside, comfortable, convenient, can't support Medicare for all because he's a major recipient of pharmaceutical money. That big money will change you. That big position will change you. And people say, oh, Brother West, why are you hating on the brother? I'm not hating on him. I'm telling the truth about it. Brother Clyburn, come to the show and tell us how much money you're getting and tell us what you were like in 1969. He said, Brother West, I matured. Depends on what you mean by maturity. I learned from your maturity, but I don't want to single him out. We got a whole wave of politicians like that. Black, white, red, brown, it cuts across the board. And we know it's in the church too, brother.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Lord have mercy.
Yeah, more so.
Lord, because especially it's something that we love. Because, see, I'm going to be faithful unto death for the Christian gospel and the blood at the cross and the black church. But people look to the church for the bread of life. How do we keep it fresh? I was talking to my dear sister, Kiana Jones. We went out to the thing together here, and she was telling me how she preached this sermon on feeding the sheep. What does it mean to feed the sheep? Spiritually, you got to feed the sheep. That's beyond politics. You got to deal with death and dread and despair and disappointment. That's beyond politics. Then you got material situation, gets political. Feeding the sheep, telling the truth about the powers that be, but also telling the truth to the relatively powerless, and then having the courage to tell the truth about yourself. You have to have all three pillars to have a great movement. And that's what we had at the highest moments of our struggle in this country. That's who Benjamin Elijah Mays was. Oh, my God. I mean, when I first met him, just like when I saw you today, I got down on my knees because I know what he went through. I know how he sustained his struggle. And he kept loving the Morehouse brothers, no matter what. When Martin Luther King arrived in Morehouse, the one thing I know I'll never be is a preacher. Things didn't turn out that way. Partly because he met a genius named Benjamin Elijah Mays from South Carolina, who provided an example, a connection. You see, that's, for me, one of the most important things. And that's why we have to be as intense, honest, candid about our faults as well as our gifts. And in fact, the way the Lord often works it is through your very faults that your strengths become even more intense and more stronger. Oh, yes, very much so. That's one reason why Jasper Williams was such a great preacher. And Reverend C.L. Franklin was such a great preacher. Why? Because they knew what it was like to be on the other side of town. And they could bring those experiences in such a way that it would empower them to speak the truth about the blood at that cross, and that the hope meant much more when you're wrestling with despair. And the faith means much more when you're wrestling at times, even with doubt. And the love has heavier gravitas if you know there's some hatred inside of you that needs to be killed every day. That's why the New Testament says, Jewish brother Paul, who wrote these powerful words after he was converted, Christians must learn how to die daily. That was the eulogy of Dorothy Day, a great vanilla Catholic sister, founder of the Catholic Workers. She said Martin Luther King Jr. learned how to die daily, drop the mic and laugh. Because Martin himself was wrestling with the greed, the hatred, the inadequacy, the sin inside of him, and it made him even greater. And that's what allowed him to say, when Daddy King told me, he said, Brother West, the lowest moment I ever had for my son before he was murdered was when he took that paddy wagon in the dark with a German shepherd from Atlanta to Reedville prison. And when he got out of that paddy wagon with that German shepherd in the dark, he couldn't walk a straight line. All he could say is, this is the cross we must bear for the freedom of our people. So cross ain't nothing you just talk about. It's not just something even that you bear, but it's something that you die on too. Because there's no crown without a cross. It's no Easter without Good Friday. There's no surprise by joy on Easter morning if you haven't been through what that Good Friday is all about. And so it's true in politics. It's true in your profession. It's true in your life. It's true in the club and in the studio. It's a human thing. It cuts all the way down. And black people have been the greatest purveyors and teachers of what love is and how to love in such a cold and cruel world, hated every day by the worst of America. And we cannot lose that tradition, but the young folk gonna do it in their own way. That's why I humble myself with young folk. I bring Curtis Mayfield, but if they want to bring some J. Cole and some Erykah Badu, I learn and listen, and I am enhanced and I am in power. Now, if they bring something else, I'll say, no, that's dumbed down stuff. That's part of the spiritual warfare against the young people, making their music thin and dumbed down. No, you come from a great people who raise their voices, not just express echoes. It's lift every voice. It ain't lift every echo. The Johnson brothers had a reason for characterizing it that way. If you don't find your voice, you ain't going to be a jazz man or a blues woman. You're going to be in Mike's basement after dark for the rest of your career, but you get ready for the Apollo, you find your voice. And same is true in the pulpit. You find your voice. Bouncing up against the voices of Gardner Taylor and Prather Wynn Hall and Carolyn Knight and Manuel Scott and John Bryan and so many others. But when you find your voice, and brother, you got a powerful voice now.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, yes, you do. You got a powerful voice, my brother.
Thank you.
And that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
But just, of course, there's no voice without blood, sweat, and tears. No voice without blood, sweat, and tears. So you can't sound like Al Green and be a Boy Scout your whole life. Can't do it. Just like you can't be on Pontius Pilate's payroll and say you following Jesus into the temple. Can't do it. Well, for God, all things are possible. Now, I believe that. So somehow God can work it out. But from our vantage point, it's going to be hard. You see. But when you carry all of those burdens and put on that full arm of the 6th chapter of Ephesians, oh, the Lord can use you, but the Lord can't use cowards. Martin used to say, I'd rather be dead than afraid. Mary Ellen Pleasant, the great godmother of human rights in California, she was a black sister. She gave John Brown $500,000 in 1854. She's the first black millionaire before Sister Walker of Indianapolis. Yeah. She had married Robert Barron. He dropped dead. She got the money. And she founded all these centers for poor people and addiction. She would always begin every speech, I'd rather be a corpse than a coward. I'd rather be a corpse and a coward. That's Mary Ellen Pleasant. My God, what a standard. None of us can meet that standard. But at least we know what the standards are. You know what I mean?
Yes.
We know what we are. Miles Davis couldn't hit the high C of Louis Armstrong at the end of West End Blues. He blew that high C after his mama died. Something was deep inside of him at the end of West End Blues. So Miles said, I'm going to play it cool. I'm going to play my East St. Louis version. That's different than Louis'. And the same would be true with Carmen McRae vis-a-vis of Sarah Vaughan. That's part of the greatness of our tradition, bouncing off against the highest standards and then finding our own voices and knowing that we can pass it on to the younger generation. So when it comes to campaigns, we already looking at the world through the lens of the cross. And the cross is unarmed truth and unconditional love for the least of these. And then we enter the political debate with our own fire, our own vision, our own analysis, and our own internal references to moral and spiritual greatness within our tradition and learning from other traditions.
What I think is lost, Dr. West, is the number. New York Times did an article about 3 weeks ago that the fastest growing faith demographic are those who register as non.
Yes.
They're not committed to anything. The exact same number of those who see themselves as none, they believe in God, but are not connected to any organized faith, is the exact same amount of people who register as uncommitted voters. What do you see as that intersection, as an absence of a faith home and the absence of a political place?
Good God Almighty. See, you teaching me, my brother. You instructed me. I haven't seen that poll. That's fascinating. I shouldn't be surprised, though, because if you live in a market culture and you end up with dominant forms of market religion, not just at the church, but in the mosque and in the synagogue and in the temples, then people who have a genuine, deep hunger for the real thing of love and faith and hope, they're going to turn away. They still have the hunger and the thirst, but they turn away. I was just at the mosque with my dear brother Imam. What's my dear brother's name? The brother went to Harvard with me. Pleeman. Oh, I love that brother. I'm getting old. Biden's not the only brother working on things. But my dear brother Pleeman, we were at Harvard together. He also connected to the network I was talking about. But Imam Pleeman Al-Hameen, I love that brother. I respect that brother. And we were talking about the same thing, this sense of hunger. And so many of the folk who are in the mosque who are black came from churches.
That's right.
And there were critiques of the church. They didn't see enough deep spirituality, moral discipline, and so forth, you see. And Muslims are growing, but they themselves can be subject to the same market forces and not want to take a stand in that regard. And so you end up with this growing number of folk. We're hungry and thirsty for genuine religious faith and spirituality, but we're not getting it in the institutions of religion.
That's right.
And so we have to try to keep alive what I'd call the prophetic wings of the black church. And this is true in synagogues. This is true in mosques and so forth. And we learn from each other. We're at a moment now where I think we could reach the conclusion, as Rabbi Heschel did in 1965 in his great essay, no religion is an island. No religion is an island. What does that mean? That means that any of us in the black community or any of us in the American community, we are learning from those of other religious traditions. Just like when you gave this powerful speech there at the UN, you followed by imam.
That's right.
Followed by a rabbi. We march with them. Right? We know our theological differences. We ground it in our own traditions, but we come together with a solidarity and a genuine coalition because we're fighting against various forms of evil. The ecumenical movement among religious traditions is crucial, but the largest ecumenical movement in the world right now is organized greed, institutionalized hatred that takes the form of nihilism. And nihilism means might makes right, raw power dictates reality, lies triumph over truth, and those who are most powerful and strongest say and do anything and get away with it. That's not true. That's true not just for America. That's true across the world.
Yeah.
And we have to have a coalition against that. And unfortunately, you got a whole wave of Christians who are part of the institutionalized hatred. That's not new for black people. The KKK got a different conception of the cross than New Birth. Same symbol. One used for demonic and devilish ends, the Klan. The other used for that blood at the bottom of that cross. New Birth at its best, you see. And so in that sense, the question becomes, how do we speak to them in such a way that they understand our witness? The challenge is going to be that we don't cater to them. And what I mean cater to them is you don't just find out what you think your convictions ought to be because a poll is saying X or a poll is saying Y, or the way in which you create coalition is simply to go along with things that you really don't agree with. You got to let folk know where you stand. You got to let folk know these are the convictions we have, and then see where we can overlap. See, the last thing the Christian church needs to do is to give up on the great landmark spirituality and landmark witness of the black church. Because once you give that up, then you only have an abstract academic discussion, and you don't have anything that's going to sustain you when your mama is in the coffin and you standing there waiting for strength to sustain you. That's not a political moment. Or when your child is sick at 7. Or when your friend betrays you at 28. That's a spiritual issue. You're going to need a spiritual source that's not dictated by ideology and politics. And if you give that up, no matter how politically correct you are, you're going to collapse. You're not going to be able to sustain yourself and be yourself as a part of that coalition. And we learn something from black musicians as well in terms of our coalitions, because a lot of times, a lot of young folk come up to me and say, well, Brother West, I want to be your white ally. I say, white ally? What you talking about? What you talking about? Miles Davis Quartet, he had a white brother named Bill Evans playing the piano, didn't he? So you think he turned the train, Coltrane, you play your solo. Ron Carter, you play your solo on the bass. Now we're going to have the white ally solo. No, we're going to have the solo by the piano player. His name is Bill Evans. He's in the band. He ain't no white ally. He's in the band. John Brown wasn't no white ally if he died for black people. He's in the Mother Shut Your Mouth band. When folk are in the band, they've already proven themselves by being tried and true enough, by being there in the foxholes and the struggles, and they become integral to any movement. The same is true with Sly Stone's band. White brother playing the drums, white brother playing the saxophone. You think Sly gonna turn to Greg and Jerry and say, now we got the white ally solos? No, they in the band. The struggle is being in the band. When you in the band, you've already proven yourself. You in the band, you reliable, you trustworthy. Now, it's true that the white brothers and sisters have to humble themselves, shatter their arrogance, shatter their condescension. Don't think they know everything because they're from the vanilla side of town. They got to humble themselves. Bill Evans deeply, deeply humbled himself before the genius of Miles Davis. We know that.
Oh, yes.
We know that. But when you in the band, you've got a deep human connection. It's brother, sister, sibling at its deepest level. And you see that in the language of of James Baldwin and Audre Lorde and others who understood that the band that they were a part of was always one that was based on integrity and honesty and trust, no matter what your skin pigmentation or sexual orientation or gender or national identity and so forth. Mandela understood that with Brother Slovo in South Africa. Strong unity and solidarity, ebony and ivory, black and white. And it's not about kumbaya. It's about you could rely on folk because they come through owing to their courage and integrity. That's what we need more of. But we are experiencing a moral renaissance right now.
Yes.
Even as the empire is dying and decaying, there is something that is emerging. And more of our young people are part of that. And we just want to tell our young folk, no matter what you come up with, keep the love and justice, not hatred and revenge, at the center of it. Don't slap your grandmama in the face, in the grave, or over the porch of heaven by trying to be so sophisticated that somehow you think you can give up on the love and talk about hatred and revenge and think you a revolutionary. Get off that crack pipe now. You got something to learn from your great-grandmothers and fathers. They had a spiritual insight and a moral wisdom, and it has everything to do with love and justice and staying in contact with the humanity of other people, even when they were enslaved, even when they were lynched, even when they were Jim and Jane Crow. It may not have been an effective tactic overnight, but look at you now. You still in your right mind enough to be wrong.
You have been listening to the Jamal Bryant Podcast, and let's be clear, there is absolutely no doubt that in a culture that now glorifies ignorance, we're grateful that Dr. Cornel West is making brilliance vogue again, that there is value in being a critical thinker, and all the more by being an active doer. Help me celebrate the genius, the prowess, and the intelligence of Dr. Cornel West.
Oh, God bless New Birth Baptist Church. Yeah. God be with New Birth Baptist. And my dear brother, Reverend Dr. Jamal Harrison Bryant. Lord, Lord, Lord.
Were you all blessed today? Absolutely. Amazing. Let me ask, if you will, Dr. West has got to leave momentarily, but I wanted you all to know how much I value and appreciate your presence on today. This is going to drop on Thursday at 12 noon on all streaming platforms, so I need you to share it with your constituents. We are in a grave danger zone. This is the largest amount of Black people who are vowing not to participate in the democratic process in this election, and we cannot risk it. And so I need you to please share it. Let's have a dialogue, conversation, and let's spread the rumor. There is a viable candidate who is for the people and by the people and with the people, Dr. Cornel West. Come on, let's give him another applause.